Hey, it's the Deaf Man from Deaf Man Vinyl, here to share with you some of my favorite records from the 60s psychedelic era, which really was an incredibly exciting time for music. You know, artists were having their doors blown wide open by yes, drugs, but also by a kind of a new spirit of what could be done with their instruments. So, you know, some crazy stuff with feedback and incorporating sounds from other cultures, you know, particularly the Middle East with sitars. And they were also kind of pushing the envelope in the studio with looping and backmasking. So an incredibly exciting time for music. And full disclosure, I was probably born about 12 years too late to be a full-fledged Woodstock going hippie. But 16, 17-year-old me was kind of a mushroom munching, headband rocking, VW bus driving freak boy back in the day running around South Florida. So this music has always been really close to my heart. Still love it, still listen to it. That said, some of the stuff has aged better than others. But what I want to share with you are some of the records that, in my opinion, have stood the test of time. So if you're just getting into vinyl and are starting a collection, I would say these definitely belong in your crate. So let's start with the record that I would say launched the genre. The Beatles in 1965 with Revolver, in particular one song. It's the final track on Revolver, and it's a mind blower. Tomorrow Never Knows.
Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream.
So I would say the Beatles fired the first shot in psychedelia. So next up, Jimi Hendrix. So no rock collection would be complete without Jimi. It's kind of sobering to realize that his recorded output as the Jimi Hendrix Experience was just 3 records released between 1967 and 1968. So tons of stuff has come out posthumously and continues to come out, but just 3 while he was alive. So Axis Bold as Love is certainly a solid album, but my vote for the trippiest Hendrix album is Electric Ladyland. Now, of course, everyone knows all along the Watchtower and Voodoo Child, but there really are some sonic gems in here. 1983, A Merman, I Should Turn to Be, leading the pack. The Naked Lady UK cover of this album is particularly collectible. Of course, the epicenter of all things happening back then was the West Coast, San Francisco in particular, the Summer of Love, 1967. You had Haight-Ashbury, where the Grateful Dead were making music. And I'm not going to add a particular Dead album to this list other than to say that the Grateful Dead absolutely belong in any psychedelia collection. But they were a live band, not a studio band. And so the good news is that the Dead were probably the most archived band in the history of music by fans and by the band itself. So tons of great stuff being released over the years. Look for the Dick's Picks series, and you can check out plenty of live stuff on the streaming services. So another great San Francisco band is Jefferson Airplane. Love these guys. So probably the most accessible album is the first one, Surrealistic Pillow. It's got White Rabbit, Somebody to Love. This one actually rocks pretty hard, but my vote for their most psychedelic album is After Bathing at Baxter's. I don't have a copy of it here, but that one features some massive jams and is probably one of their most experimental records. So I'm going to go a bit deeper here with one of my faves. First up would be an LA band called Spirit, and a band so California that their guitarist vocalist is named Randy California. And they had some hits with songs like I've Got a Line on You and Fresh Garbage. But my favorite album, and certainly gets the award for the trippiest album name, is The 12 Dreams of Dr. Sarkonicus. This is one is from 1970, and it features Mr. Skin and Nature's Way, which was a big hit for them. And if you're really interested in this band, check out their self-titled debut from 1968 and a song called Taurus, which sounds eerily like Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. And that song was at the center of a ridiculously long-running copyright infringement lawsuit, which Zepp ultimately prevailed in. So listen to Taurus and see what you think. Another band that really kind of flies below the radar is Vanilla Fudge. And I would call them kind of the missing link between psychedelia and what would go on to become heavy metal. So a lot of extended heavy rock arrangements of contemporary hit songs, everything slowed down, half speed, very heavy, very trippy. This is their first one from 1967, which featured You Keep Me Hanging On, which was a big hit, as well as covers of Ticket to Ride and Eleanor Rigby. Next up, the Chambers Brothers. These guys were kind of the psychedelic soul brothers, and The Time Has Come is a very tasty bit of psychedelia that a lot of people know, but I think their real masterpiece is Love, Peace, and Happiness. And so this album was recorded live at the Fillmore East, and the title track is just a gorgeous jam that takes up all of side 2. Puts me in my happy hippie place every time I hear it. And so the album is a little hard to track down, but definitely worth the search. Next up, Country Joe and the Fish, electric music for mind and body. Very trippy album from the guys who led the Fish Cheer at Woodstock. And it's 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. So this one is really the first psychedelic album to come out of San Francisco. It was 1967, and if you were going to put an album in an exhibit on the 60s in the Smithsonian, this would be the one that would belong in there. So speaking of Woodstock, the Woodstock album, which is actually a soundtrack of the movie, and it's absolute musical time capsule of the psychedelic era. It can be a little rough around the edges, but you've got Jimi Hendrix unleashing the Star-Spangled Banner, you got the crowd chants, you got the stage announcements, and the warning about the bad brown acid going around. To me, the absolute blazer, hands down, on this album is Santana's Soul Sacrifice, so worth the price of admission. I'm also loving Arlo Guthrie's Ode to Drug Smuggling on Coming into Los Angeles. So it's a 3-record set that has been repressed and reissued, and we have it here in the shop. There's also a Woodstock 2 album with a little more Hendrix, some more Jefferson Starship, and some Mountain. And then a surprise find for me is this one from the Bee Gees. Yep, the same Aussie brothers who brought us Staying Alive and You Should Be Dancing. My friend at Leech Pit Records out in Colorado turned me on to this one. It's an absolute classic of psychedelic pop. Beautifully written, beautifully performed. It's got Holiday, New York Mining Disaster, To Love Somebody. They're all on there. The album's called Bee Gees First, although it was actually their 3rd studio album. And parts of it sound very, very much like the Beatles, circa Revolver. So beautiful record. I've had a hard time finding good copies of this, and they can get pretty pricey, but definitely well worth it. And finally, the drum solo, please. The hands down, undisputed heavyweight champion of psychedelia, the 13th Floor Elevators. So forget about San Francisco. The capital of psychedelic rock in 1966 was without a doubt Austin, Texas, home to one of the wildest, rawest, hands down, freakiest bands of the era. The 13th Floor Elevators were the trailblazers. They were actually the first band to refer to their music as psychedelic rock, and they were also literally out of their freaking minds on high-grade LSD, which was legal at the time. So LSD was not outlawed here until October of 1968. And they had a hit with You're Gonna Miss Me, and there's this kind of this crazy twirling, burbling sound, which I guarantee you've never heard anywhere else, which is actually from an electric jug, which is just what it sounds like, a guy blowing across the mouth of a jug into a microphone. So unmistakable sound that you're really not gonna hear anywhere else. Rocky Erickson was the guitarist and lead singer, and he had this kind of only in the 60s kind of story. He got busted for possession of a joint, one joint, which in Texas at the time meant prison time. And so to beat the rap, he pleaded insanity and was committed to a mental hospital for a year in 1969. And the story gets kind of sad from there with, mental illness, maybe drug fueled, maybe not. Long periods of isolation, he'd disappear, and then somebody would track Rocky down. So he had this kind of cult following, and he'd make music again. He's got a great song called Two-Headed Dog that I love. And Rocky died in 2019. The Psychedelic Sound of the 13th Floor Elevators is his lasting legacy. It's been reissued, and there's a nice Rocky Erickson compilation out there also that we've got in the shop. It's called The Evil One. So there you have it, a very subjective, very personal list of some of my favorite psychedelic. Again, a genre of music that just really means a lot to me, connects with me. Would love to hear your favorites. I know I left some off, and I know somebody's gonna be like, how could you have left that one off? But yeah, drop us a line, let us know. Tell me what your favorite psychedelic band is, your favorite psychedelic album. So it's been great talking with you. Until next time, keep them spinning.